Hi, this is Mr. RB. Today we're going to explore radial symmetry weaving. I've already put my name on the back of this paper plate, so I'm ready to go. I'm using the plate as a loom, and I want to add some color to it because in this case, the loom or frame on which we build our weaving is going to stay as part of the finished artwork. I have a brush and some paint. You could use crayon or marker or pretty much anything, but I like the way the tempera paint looks. I've chosen three colors that are analogous to each other: blue, green, and yellow. On the color wheel, or in the rainbow, they would come in that order: blue, green, yellow. I'm going to start with my blue and go in rainbow color wheel analogous, which means similar, order. I'm making a nice circle because I want to keep everything as symmetrical as possible. And with radial symmetry, we should be able to divide our design top to bottom or side to side. And either way, the two sides would be the same. Some radial symmetry designs have even more lines of symmetry. If you have a circle, that has an infinite number of lines of symmetry. If you have a square, there could be 4 lines of symmetry. I'm just putting a thin coat of this tempera paint on just to spruce up the color and make my finished design look more appealing, engaging, and exciting. I think it also makes it look more personal. I've tried them on plates where I don't paint it, and I've never been quite as happy. I'm going to wash my brush out well, because I'm going from the green to the yellow, and a little bit of green would make my yellow not so yellow anymore. I find some colors, some pigments, are a lot stronger than others. A little bit of blue will make a whole lot of yellow look green, whereas a little bit of yellow that gets in the blue generally won't change it that much. I want to keep my yellow as possible. So that's why I tried to clean my brush well. I'm also being careful as I go around because the green paint is still a little damp, and my brush will pick it up and spread it into the yellow, which at the moment is not what I want. Sometimes, as artists, we do like that. Sometimes we don't. Well, I've finished painting. I'm going to squeeze out the rest of this water from the brush so it's ready to clean up. I'm going to take this over and get things cleaned up. That'll give the paint a little chance to dry. I'm ready for my next step, and I want to create an odd number of marks around the rim of my plate. I'll need them in a few moments. So I'm going to start with 1 and 2 and 3. I'll try to place them evenly, but if they're not exactly even, it won't get in the way of our work. Now I'm going to divide each of those spaces in 2. Divide in 2, divide in 2, divide in 2. Now I'm going to divide all of those in 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm wondering how many spaces I have now. I'm going to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I need an odd number, And I could go for 13, which I find usually works well for a dinner size plate like this. 15, 17, or 19 can also work. I'm going to try to go for maybe, let's see what we've got. We've got a small space here, so I'm going to divide this one in two, and that'll give me 13. I could stop there, or I could divide two more and make it 14 and 15. That's really good enough for me. I'm going to stop at 15 today. I want to turn these into sort of sun rays or flower petals. I'm just connecting the dots to the rim. And I have to say, right now I'm using a Sharpie, so it's easier for you to see what I'm doing. But you may want to use a pencil, just in case you want to change something. Or even if the marks still show, they won't be so noticeable in pencil. I, of course, want these marks to be very noticeable right now, so it's easier for anyone watching this video to see what I'm doing. I'm working my way all the way around, and you may notice my flower petals are not all exactly the same width. If I was very concerned with being even more symmetrical, I'd probably measure them. Or I could count these little rings that come out on this particular sort of plate. But I'm going to let that go for today because I want to enjoy the painting and the weaving and not worry too much about being perfectly, mathematically, measurably the same all over. Well, I have my petals drawn. The next thing I'm going to do is cut them out. All right, I have cut them all out. I've gathered up my scraps, and I'm going to throw them out in a minute, but I just want to check and see, do I have a correct or a workable number of cuts? And I'm going to start here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yay, an odd number. 15 is right in the range we're looking for, so I'm good to go. I got to tell you, if you make a mistake, you can usually divide one petal in two or do something else to change it. If not, hopefully you have another piece of paper or another paper plate hanging around. Hold on, we're going to start with the next step in just a moment. I'm ready to start putting on the warp strings. The warp strings are going to be the structure that everything else gets woven onto, and they'll go back and forth across the plate. When we're done with those, we'll add the spiral weaving or weft lines. For my warp strings, I've picked out this aqua green sort of yarn. Any color would do, but I thought this would look nice with my yellow, blue, green analogous color theme, and I'm going to keep going with that. So I'm going to start over here, and I'm going to use a little extra and hold it there. Then I go through between two of my petals, through one of the places between, and I want to go over to the other side. One side will have one more petal than the others. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The other side has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. Well, if I know that this side has more of the petals, I'm going to make my next move towards that side. Notice I'm going to go around, I'm going to go behind that petal and then back up. And then I'm going to cross, going across the flower to the opposite side. After I go to the opposite side, I go around the neighbor. Then I go to the opposite side, then the neighbor, then the opposite side, then the neighbor, then the opposite side, then the neighbor, then the opposite side, then the neighbor, and finally back up through that last neighbor. Well, I have this all set, but I need to figure out how I'm going to attach this string so it doesn't dangle in the middle of things. I'm going to cut it off with a little extra to spare. And I'm going to go around, just go across halfway, not all the way to the other pedal side, but just halfway. And I'm going to go around that middle. It doesn't matter whether you go under first or over, as long as you go around. And I'm just gently holding that middle a little so I can pull this string or this piece of the yarn a little taut. I don't want to pull it so tightly that it bends the plate, but I just do want to go around it. I'm going to come back over and I'm going to make a knot. I'm lifting up this warp string over here. I'm going to go under it. Notice that there's a little loop. I'm going to twist that loop around, and Mr. Rabbit goes through the loop and up through the hole. I'm going to hold that knot and sort of brush it down towards the middle of my plate. If I'm not sure or if it doesn't seem tight enough, I can always add an extra knot. Won't hurt. Oh, look, there's one. I twist. Mr. Rabbit goes through the hole and up through the other side. Again, I'm sort of brushing that loop down so I get a nice fit. I have an extra tail here, and I don't want to cut it too short because then my knot might come out. But I probably have a little extra more than I need, so I will shorten it a little. If you're not sure, better to leave it. You can always trim it later. Now I have one more step before I start my weaving. I need to turn this over and tie this on the back. I can either tie it just by connecting under there on the front and going around and having Mr. Rabbit come through. If I would rather, this is just a sculpture. Nobody's going to be using this for cloth. I could take a little piece of tape, and I have some masking tape over here, and I could simply tape it down. I do want to keep things a little bit taut. It'll make it easier for weaving. So I could either tape this down, that'll work, or if I prefer, I could just tie that onto one of the pieces that are there. Oh, look. And I have this loop over here, so I'm going to go around the loop. Oh, look, see the little hole that we made? And in this case, Mr. Rabbit goes down into the hole. And we pull that knot tight. Gently, gently. All right. We got the back. We've got the front. We are ready to get out our first weft string, which we will weave by going around and around in a spiral. Be back in just a minute. I picked out this sort of lighter colored yarn. It's a little more neutral, but it's still in a sort of soft green, and I think it'll go nicely with my other colors. I could have picked something with a strong contrast like a black or a bright white, and that would have been nice as well. It just depends on what your theme is and what your feelings are and what you want it to do. I'm going to stay with this sort of soft, close harmony. I'm going to start by going under one string, any string at all. And I need to tie a knot. I'm going to turn this the other way for myself. So I'm going to make that loop. See the loop where my finger's sticking through? I put the yarn on my fingertip and push my fingertip through the loop, and I just pull that knot tight. Again, if you're concerned about the knot coming out at some point, you are welcome. It will not harm anything to make a double knot. I haven't really had problems with, in this sort of project, with knots coming out generally once the projects are complete, because they would usually go on the wall or be otherwise displayed where people wouldn't tend to touch them. Once I've got that on, everything else becomes under, over, and you just keep going with that. Watch this. Under, over, under, over, under, and I'm going to pull through. I need to do that every 4 or 5, maybe 6 warp strings. Otherwise, I could have trouble pulling it through. So I went under, then I go over, now I go under, then over, then under, then over, then under. Pull through. Whoops, I got caught on the pedal. I keep going around and around in a spiral with my under-over pattern. Weaving is a lot about pattern, and you just keep repeating. I'm starting to get low on remaining yarn, so it's time to add another piece. I can keep going with another piece of the same color or switch to a different color. I'm going to switch just for some variety, and I have to say I find that pieces of yarn that are about maybe 12 to 18 inches, 24 inches maybe at the most, work best. Sometimes I get tempted to use a longer piece, and I genuinely regret it because it gets in the way and sometimes gets tangled, and that's frustrating. And it's not that hard to tie on a new piece. I'm just going to take 2 pieces and I'm going to line them up together, and then I'm going to make a single loop with both of them. Oh look, a loop around my finger. I put the yarn back on the top of my finger at the tip, and I push the tip of my finger and those 2 pieces of yarn back through the loop and pull tight. Notice that I'm holding either side because I don't want to distort or rip the plate. Well, now my yarn is longer and it's 2 colors. Again, it has a tail there. Later I can tuck those away, but I could also shorten them a little now if I want. I don't like to shorten them too much because if they're too close to the knot when I cut, sometimes the knot comes undone, and that's frustrating. All right, I've got kind of a lot of yarn to go now, so I'm going to keep going. Over, under, over, under. And one thing you may notice is not only am I going over, under as I go around, but as you look at each of these stitches or weaves, notice that this time I went over, so the next time I go around, I went under that string. So I'm going over, under, over, under, over, under as I go round and round, but also as a single warp string gets worked out to the end. All right, let's keep weaving. We got a ways to go. I'm ready for another piece of yarn, and first I'm going to push this tail from the beginning underneath by pushing it through. I'm just using a pencil. Just takes a little pushing, and I'm going to push it through. Nobody's going to see the back side of this when I'm done because, as I said, it stays on the loom in this case. If you're wondering why we needed an odd number of warp strings, the reason is as you go around, an odd number of warp strings will ensure that you keep going over, under, and you go over whatever warp strings you went under the previous pass and under whichever ones you went over previously. So it keeps your weaving strong and tight and looking really nice. If you accidentally have the wrong number, there's a lot of ways you can still make it work, but this certainly makes things a little simpler. I've done as much weaving as I want to do on this one. I want to leave some of the paint showing. We can still see a little bit of the blue. A little bit. But we can see the green and the yellow, and I like how the center of the flower has a different texture, so it contrasts with the outer parts of the flower. There is no one exact amount of how wide your circle of weaving needs to be. A lot of it has to do with what looks good, and are you stopping too early because you're getting tired out, or because it just has reached its peak wonderfulness. And with a project like this, we want it to be at its peak wonderfulness, and the weaving brings in a texture and a sense of commitment by the artist that the paint alone wouldn't offer. So definitely do enough, but you have to decide how far out are you going to go. The farthest out you could go would be to where the warp strings bend around the back. Just physically, that's going to be about as far as you get. When you're done, I'm going to say that one way to finish this off is just wherever you ended on that last warp string, just circle around the warp string and behind whatever you were weaving with. So you make a loop, then Mr. Rabbit can come up through the hole and sort of brush that little loop down so that you pull it tight. I have a fair bit of a tail hanging off, and I could just tuck that under here because this is a sculptural piece, and really nobody's ever going to really look at that. I have a few other bits hanging out that I might not like, so I can use a pencil or something else to just push those extra tails through and hide them on the back side of my weaving. You know, in this piece, I kept to an analogous color theme. I like analogous color themes for their harmony, sense of calm and peace. I love those colors that are so close to each other on the color wheel and can look so harmonious next to each other. I enjoy opposite colors or complementary colors for the way they bring so much energy and excitement and visual pizzazz to a design. Every possible color combination or theme has its strengths and its purpose. And a lot of it depends on what are you trying to communicate to your audience. Different times, that may be different things. Sometimes it could be based on what you yourself like best. Sometimes you might be making something for someone else. And so then you're thinking, well, what color combinations would they like? Or how would they like it to feel? What sort of feeling would you like it to elicit from people? Well, that neatens it up a little bit. Again, I have my name on the back, so we know whose is whose later on. That's kind of useful. And there you go. One radially symmetrical, more or less, weaving. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy making your own radial weaving.